This is the Master Brewers Podcast, brought to you by the Master Brewers Association of the Americas, a volunteer organization dedicated to continually improving the products and processes of our membership since 1887.
Let's go!
Master Brewers brings you interviews with the industry's best and brightest in brewing science, technology, and operations.
Calm down, I'm moving too fast.
This Master Brewers podcast is proudly sponsored by Hopsteiner, a global leader in the hop industry focused on quality, sustainability, and innovation in new hop varieties and hop products. Contact our brewery sales team to provide you with the hop-related tools you need to craft your next great beer. For more information, visit hopsteiner.com.
Additional support provided by
Get to know Proximity Malt. We malt superior, European-style, low-protein varieties grown close to home in Delaware and Colorado. Domestically grown, precisely malted to style. With our team of seasoned experts and 2 brand-new malt houses, try what's really new in malt. Check us out at www.proximitymalt.com.
And thanks also to
The secret to quality fermentation is White Labs. Core strains are made weekly and most can ship out the next day. Order through the White Labs app or yeastman.com. Visit whitelabs.com/whywhitelabs for a new customer special offer. That's whitelabs.com/WHY Whitelabs.
Earlier indicators would be those loss of thiols and color development through polyphenol oxidation. Those are going to be your first early indicators that you are seeing this oxidation on the hot side. If you are seeing teak formation, that definitely is an indication that you have too much air being introduced early in your process.
This week on the show, Joe Williams, the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company Endowed Brewer at UC Davis, talks about hot side aeration. Joe, we're talking about hot side aeration today, which is often referred to as HSA in the literature. If you ask a room full of brewers whether or not hot side aeration matters, you'll probably get a variety of answers, right?
Correct. And a lot of this comes from literature. If you read through literature, you'll find articles that say it does matter, and you'll find articles that say it doesn't matter. And so it does lead to a little bit of confusion. And so we do need to put it in context and talk about how scale impacts all of this.
What are some of the reasons a brewer might want to limit HSA?
Sure. So if you look at kind of literature, it breaks it down as to kind of some of the negatives of hot side aeration. And so we can kind of start thinking of whether some of these things matter and whether we should really be concerned about them. So if you look through the list kind of put out by Kuntz in Technology of Malting and Brewing, it says that minimizing hot side aeration will lead to increased degradation of beta glucan, and with it, starch degradation is improved. So that's a good thing. We do want to limit hot side aeration for that reason. It says the attenuation limit is higher. You do see that lautering is faster and it is more complete. Wort color and beer colors are paler. Beer taste is less coarse, and it's also said that flavor stability is improved. Some of these things are arguable, I would say, depending on the scale, but some of them are definitely true and are reasons for limiting hot side aeration.
Let's dive a little deeper into flavor stability. Which types of reactions are relevant here?
Sure. So there's been a couple of different things proposed as to kind of how limiting hot side aeration would minimize flavor change and improve flavor stability. One of them is that it would limit the amount of unsaturated fat or acids that are oxidized, either enzymatically through lipoxygenase or non-enzymatically. But there are LOX-free malts that are out there, and so even with that, you don't see much change. So that's kind of questionable. The other one is keeping thiols in the sulfhydryl form so that they don't contribute to redox mechanisms. And so these sulfhydryl residues can lose the hydrogen and form redox sinks. And the other thing you can do is you can minimize the loss of polyphenols and preserve their antioxidant effect, lending flavor stability downstream.
We talked about lipoxygenase or LOX back on episode 129 with Dr. Aaron and Dr. Yin. We also know, as you just mentioned, that LOX-free malt is available, and we've heard from our conversations with Joe Hertrick how LOX is easily destroyed on the kiln if your base malt color specs aren't too low. So I guess it's pretty clear that HSA can do a lot of damage in a brew house when LOX is present, but what about when it's not?
Sure. So even without LOX present, you still can get conversion of these fatty acids to trans 2-nonenal or E2-nonenal. And the way this happens is by a reactive oxygen species actually pulling an electron off of, pulling a hydrogen off of the unsaturated fatty acids. And it leaves it in a way that, or in a state that it can go on and form a carbonyl. And so this can happen if you have reactive oxygen species present, and you are going to have reactive oxygen species presence in most massage.
Okay, let's hear about thiols and HSA. What are the implications there?
Sure. So the idea behind thiols and HSA is that there are residues in proteins, specifically cysteine and methionine, that contain sulfhydryl residues, and we're really more concerned with cysteine. In the presence of reactive oxygen species, or what will happen is it'll lose hydrogen, and these hydrogens will combine with the oxygen and form hydrogen peroxide. And then you have hydrogen peroxide that is unstable and will go on and form radical oxygen species, reacting with metal ions, and then you get this radical oxygen cycle that just wreaks havoc on your beer. And so the idea being that these thiols could come in and quench this reaction. Problem is that there isn't enough thiol present to actually regenerate this redox sink to quench the reaction. And so it doesn't seem like you can get enough thiols into beer to stop this.
You also mentioned polyphenols. There are some polyphenols that we want to minimize, but in this case, I assume you're talking about the type of polyphenols that are known to function as antioxidants.
Correct. And so we often just look at polyphenols as total polyphenol levels, but that's not the whole story. And so we often prescribe a certain polyphenol level, total polyphenol level, and say if we hit that target, then everything's fine. But that may not be the case. There are different types of phenolic compounds that will make up your total polyphenols in your beer. So we should be looking at this in a more refined way and starting to understand what monomers and dimers we have present, and what polyphenols we have present, and how this can actually affect flavor stability and the overall beer quality. So you had Dr. Aaron and Dr. Yin on a couple weeks ago talking about freshness, and they were looking at not just fan levels, but trying to get down into different amino acids, and how those different amino acids and the ordered uptake affects flavor stability and Strecker degradations and flavor development. And I think we could probably say something similar with polyphenols, and it's not just total polyphenols, but the individual phenolics that are making up the total polyphenols is going to matter.
Coming up.
Just like if you were to cut up an apple and you see it develop a brown color over time, you see polyphenol oxidation. That same thing is happening in your beer and your worts. And so worts will darken, and you do see color development through oxidation.
I'm John Bryce, and you're listening to the Master Brewers podcast from the Master Brewers Association of the Americas. Support for this podcast is brought to you by
ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery and parts outfitter. From our Raleigh headquarters to our Denver office, we proudly offer brew houses and fermenters from 3 barrels and up, yeast brinks, boilers, kegs, chillers, tri-clamp, and other stainless parts, all with the quickest delivery and lead times in the industry. Learn more at abs-commercial.com or call 877-BREW-ABS. ABS Commercial. We are brewers.
Additional support provided by
Bring the world to your brewhouse with BSG's diverse selection of ingredients and services. Our dedicated customer service team and industry experience provides you with the assistance you need every step of the way. Make BSG your supplier of choice with products essential to making great artisanal beverages so you can stay focused on your craft. Visit us at bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact us at 1-800-374-2739.
And thanks also to
Malt Europe Malting Company is a leading supplier of craft malt across North America. As a farmer-owned company, Malt Europe has carefully crafted quality malt from locally grown barley for decades. The result? A portfolio of base, specialty, and distillers' malts that exceed the exacting standards of craft brewers. Learn more and buy online at malteuropemaltingco.com.
Here's what's coming up on the Master Brewers calendar. Don't miss the basic lab equipment for your brewery webinar August 8th, presented by our friend John Geritano from episode 64. District Rocky Mountain meets August 14th at New Terrain Brewing in Golden. Master Brewers Brewery Systems Technology and Maintenance course starts August 18th in Madison. District Carolinas meets August 23rd at Boonshine Brewing. The 2019 Eastern Technical Conference is in Philadelphia August 23rd and 24th. The District Ontario Hop Field Day is August 24th at Goodlot Farmstead Brewing Company. The Eastern Canada Golf Day is August 29th. The District Ontario Annual Golf Tournament is September 6th. A lot of golf in Canada. District Northwest meets in Bend the weekend of September 7th. The District Ontario Iron Brewer is at Common Good Beer Co. September 27th. New Hampshire Brewfest 2019 is October 12th in Portsmouth. District St. Louis meets October 17th. And the brand new District Georgia is holding its first annual pig roast October 19th at Monday Night Brewing in Atlanta. Registration is now open for the 2019 Master Brewers Conference in Calgary. Be sure to tack on a couple of extra days to enjoy some amazing hiking and make the 45-minute trip to Banff, which is one of the most picturesque places on the planet. Check out the full calendar of events at mbaa.com for more details or to find a district meeting near you. Now back to the show. We've talked about the potential impact of HSA on unsaturated fatty acids, thiols, and polyphenols, which all make sense theoretically, but what's the practical outcome? I guess the question really is, how does a brewer know if there's low-hanging fruit in regards to HSA in their brewery versus if this is the wrong rabbit hole to go down?
That's a great question. It's hard to say whether there's anything with hot side aeration in most beers. Scale obviously matters when you're dealing on this on a small scale. The surface area to volume is difficult to deal with. We've got a little barrel and a half system here on campus, and I will say it does matter on our scale. It's hard to exclude enough oxygen to deal with some of these things. But if you're brewing at a 60 barrel or 100 barrel or even a 200 barrel brew house, it's not much of an issue. I don't think you can get enough air into a system like that to cause issues. So I think the first thing you do is you look at your process. You walk it backwards and forwards, and you look at where air can be getting in or where you're doing a good job of excluding air, and you start there.
All right, very good. You also suggest that lautering is faster when HSA is minimized. Why is that? This
is fun. So as I mentioned, we've got a barrel and a half system on campus, and we do have problems with hot side aeration, hot side oxidation in our brew house. What we see is teague formation. And teague develops when you have those sulfhydryl groups in those proteins. They oxidize and they'll form disulfide bridges, and specifically the cysteine residues. And those disulfide bridges come together and you cause something called a gel protein. And it's sticky and tacky, and they'll combine with small starch molecules that survive the malting process. And you get this dough on top of your mash. And in extreme cases, we get some that looks like a cap on top of our mash. And it's impenetrable. Liquid does not flow through it. So you get massive channeling, and your lauter times go up and your extraction goes down. Not good things.
What about beer color and flavor? What do we know about the impacts there?
Sure. So when you oxidize worts, the first things that are oxidizing are those thiols. And then you start oxidizing the polyphenols. And so as we talked about, the polyphenol levels will change over time. Not just the total polyphenol levels, but the actual polyphenol, the phenolic structures will change over time. The ratios will change. Just like if you were to cut up an apple and you see it develop a brown color over time, you see polyphenol oxidation. That same thing is happening in your beer and your worts. And so worts will darken, and you do see color development through oxidation. And so worts and beers will be paler if you minimize brewhouse oxidation. There is, in literature, you'll find that people say that if you oxidize these polyphenols, you also tend to get a more harsh or coarse flavor. I have a hard time dealing with a lot of the sensory stuff out there, just because a lot of it's anecdotal, and I don't think a lot of the sensory work that has been done historically is lends itself holds up to the scientific rigor we would like it to. So a lot of that's anecdotal, but it is said that it does lend a less coarse flavor, whatever that means.
What are typically the biggest culprits of HSA in modern brewhouse equipment? Is it pump seals, mashing in, splashing during Vorloff, or something else?
Again, I think it depends on the scale, and it depends on the age of your brewhouse. Most modern brewhouses are fairly well designed and to minimize this. But if you start looking at some of the older equipment, this was not a thought. A lot of copper brewhouses are going to lend copper ions that are going to lead to radical formations that are going to cause a lot of these reactions anyway. So how much of it really matters on that scale? I think if you look at the process and you start, with milling your malt, when you start with a 55-pound bag of malt and you mill it, it expands. What's taking up the additional volume? It's typically air. And so now you're going to pour that into your mash tun, and you're going to mix it with hot water. And so depending on how if you're filling from the bottom, you're obviously going to get less air introduced than you would if you're splashing everything in from the top. So it all depends on, can you redesign your mashing system? A lot of folks can't. So it's, how do you deal with this? Can you purge the system with nitrogen or CO2? Possibly. Is there really the need for it? Maybe. It's hard to say. Everybody's got to look at their own process and kind of understand what the impact's going to be for themselves. It's just, I would like people to understand that it does matter, and it is something that they should think about. Should be in the back of your mind.
Have you seen or heard of any modifications to process or equipment that have dramatically reduced HSA? Just you mentioned your pilot system, for example. Is there any particular process change or modification to the equipment that you've seen actually make a big improvement?
Not yet. We're still playing with a few things. And the fun thing about this position in this facility is that we get to see a lot of different brew processes, different recipes, and different ingredients. And anecdotally, I will say I see more or less teak formation when there's a bit of crystal malt in the recipe. And so if you start reading through literature and going back to when you had Dr. Aaron and Dr. Ian on, they talked about melanoidins and how they play into all of this, and radical formation. And so it's a complex matrix, and it's hard to assign causation to any one thing. And so you really need to look at the whole process holistically and go from there.
Do you think teague formation is one of the best indicators of hot side aeration?
No, I would say it's probably it's a good indication that you have way too much. I think earlier indicators would be those loss of thiols and color development through polyphenol oxidation. Those are going to be your first early indicators that you are seeing this oxidation on the hot side. If you are seeing teague formation, that definitely is an indication that you have too much air being introduced early in your process.
That was Joe Williams here on the Master Brewers podcast. Well, this is where I'd normally say something like, if you want to learn more about hot side aeration, go to the District Presentations Archive to get a copy of the presentation Joe gave last spring during the combined District Southern Cal and Northern Cal Technical Conference. But sadly, the California District officers have not uploaded these presentations. Come on, guys, get it together. Getting this information into the archive helps brewers for years to come. I guess I'll just add links in the show notes to some of the other Master Brewers resources and discussion threads about HSA. Check out the brand new Master Brewers podcast website. You'll find guest profiles, information about upcoming live events, and more, all at masterbrewerspodcast.com. Hurry up! There's only a few weeks left to take advantage of discounted early bird registration for the 2019 Master Brewers Conference. And be sure to tack on a couple of extra vacation days. Here's why.
It's a really beautiful city. It's close. I mean, it's an hour from the mountains. You're in Banff, one of the most picturesque places on the planet, within 45 minutes if you want to venture out. And then if you go even further, about an hour further, is Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, which is beautiful and picturesque as well. Turquoise waters, brilliant crisp air, great people, great hikes if you like hiking. Some of the best hikes that I've ever done have been around Lake Louise, so lots of people get stirred into like the touristy zones, and there's so much more to Banff, Lake Louise, and Calgary than the tourist zones. Must-sees. I'm a huge fan of not Lake Louise itself, although it's beautiful, but Moraine Lake, which is a lake that's a little bit further up the mountain. I always tell people to go visit that lake. There's some beautiful hikes. Johnson Canyon's a pretty easy hike if you do the small hike just to a couple waterfalls. That's just outside Banff. If you go a bit further, you could do Ink Pots, which is I think it's about a 4 or 5 hour hike all in all, depending on your pace. And if you go further than the Ink Pots on that same trail, you end up in Lake Louise. So it's linked to Lake Louise, and then it becomes a full day deal. But in general, I would say if I were talking about Calgary, I would take in nature. I mean, it's at its finest. The city's beautiful, and lots of energy on 17th Ave and Electric Ave. But the real gem is heading to those Rockies and driving into Canmore and Banff and Louise and just looking around at nature at its best. It's an absolutely spectacular place to be.
Are you enjoying the Master Brewers podcast? Let me tell you about a simple way you can help us keep making more. Take a minute to thank our sponsors. There's no way we could produce this show without generous support from sponsors like Hopsteiner, ABS, Proximity Malt, White Labs, BSG, and Malt Europe. So please, let them know you heard their message on the Master Brewers podcast and that you appreciate their support.
My heart full of rage, girl. I can't get stuck, I can't be losing too much. And then I'm headed out to any payment. My fist I'm full of courage, baby. My heart full of rage, girl. I can't get stuck, I can't be losing too much. And then I'm heading out to any other place. Just my